Hello History Buffs, welcome back to my channel for another video. Today's video is really special. Instead of reviewing an idea in public history or talking about the way that media portrays public history, today's video shares one of my own ideas using a public history method: reenacting. History doesn't repeat itself, but it tends to rhyme. And sometimes we have conversations in the present day which have shown up before in places in history. In today's video, I take talking points for and against the modern day labor movement for a more socialized government, and I superimpose them over a conversation between two antebellum women. Let me be perfectly clear on one thing before we begin. This video does not argue that suffering caused by the modern-day exploitations of labor are on the same magnitude as the sufferings caused by slavery. I think I make that pretty clear in the content of the video, but I don't want anybody to get my message twisted. That is not what I'm saying. Slavery is its own can of worms. However, labor is labor, and suffering is suffering, and exploitation is exploitation. A lot of the talking points that we use today can be superimposed over a conversation about slavery. The point that I'm making by superimposing these two time periods and these two movements is that when a system is cruel, a system needs to change. I don't know a single person alive today that thinks we should go back to slavery as a viable economic system in this country. I have, however, heard lots of arguments basically arguing that individuals can work their way out of poverty or out of a bad situation if only they put their nose to the grindstone and take advantage of the resources that are available to them. The problem with this argument is that it neglects the systemic injustices which lead to so many people living in poverty and bad situations in the first place. That is the reason why I'm taking this modern conversation and I am putting it into the historic context to which I am. The two characters in this dialectic are fictitious, and they do not represent any one person, historic or contemporary to us. Their dialogue is designed to be halfway between modern issues and issues that were contemporary to these antebellum characters. By design, a viewer can substitute capitalism and the violences associated with capitalism for slavery and the violences associated with slavery. I would encourage you to watch the following twice. First, with the mindset of an abolitionist, and second, with the mindset of somebody reforming the economy today. What do you think? Who do you side with? And are the arguments compelling? I hope you enjoy this video. I had a lot of fun scripting and making it. I realize it's a serious topic, but that's part of the fun, that it matters. So without further ado, it's so good to see you again. It's been far too long. What's been keeping you? Well, it's been a busy couple of months of touring, but I'm glad to be home. What? What is this? Yes, well, as you know, I've been out west, I've been down south, and as it turns out, the economy which allows us to live the way we do is even crueler than I ever thought. The peculiar institution? Why, yes, it's dreadful. That's why we don't talk about it. Slavery. Let's call a spade a spade. It turns out that plantations produce all kinds of things that we use every day, including tea and coffee, which is why I'm afraid I cannot offer you any today. This is an infusion of blueberry and mint. Drinking herb water won't free anybody. No, but it doesn't support cruelty either. Besides, it's not so bad when you get used to it. Do you have anything else to drink? Like what? Rum or whiskey? Sugar cane and weed, plantation and plantation, no and no. Gin or scotch? In the cupboard. I see you're taking this pretty seriously. It's a pretty serious matter. I hope you're prepared to give up more than just some drinks. You know most textiles come from plantation labor, don't you? Indigo, cotton? Well, look and see what I ordered while I was away. This arrived just before I came back. 6 yards of Indian cotton produced without plantation labor. That's clearly not a finished textile. What are you even going to do with that? Well, I haven't decided yet, but my point stands that there are ethical consumer decisions to be made that do not support Southern slavery. How much did that cost to import? $10. What was that? $10. Well, good for you for having that kind of money to throw around, but you do realize that there are people who need to buy clothes and linens that cannot afford to import from India. It's amazing what things cost when you pay people for their labor. It's enough to make you think twice about how much fabric one needs for a single dress. So we should all go around ill-clothed? Why shouldn't we enjoy the finer things in life? What else are the finer things for? I like a hoop skirt as much as the next girl, but at what cost? And whose? I'm not going to tell you how to spend your money, but you have to realize that there's more to this than you by yourself can solve. The peculiar institution is something we rely on for affordable goods grown right here on American soil. It's part of our economy, part of our way of life. Good on you for being able to afford cloth from India, but not everybody can. It's prohibitively expensive for most people. I think we should be able to buy products from here in these United States too. Does it make you uncomfortable that I see a problem and I'm trying to solve it? No, of course not. Somebody has to do something about it, but I'm thinking about you. You have to realize that there's only so much one can do to reform a system. That's why I've decided to become an abolitionist. Change the paradigm. An abolitionist? You're joking. I'm quite serious. I think there's too much suffering in our current economy, and I think it should come to an end, right now. What, and let civilization collapse all around us? That's not how economics work. It doesn't have to be the way economics work. There are other ways. Other nations have abolished slavery, and Europe's doing just fine. Europe? They don't need slavery because they have their overseas empires. Besides, with a population as small and homogeneous as theirs, how do you know who's best meant for physical labor? Sure, abolition makes sense there. Yes, and it makes sense everywhere. Your argument presupposes that some people are better at farming than others, and I don't think that's true. Well, they certainly farm a lot. We farm a lot. We don't have slavery, and New York is hardly hurting for its agricultural output. All I'm saying is that if they're going to be farming anyway, why does it matter if they're farming for themselves or someone else? The output's the same, lifestyle's the same. Yes, it matters, because slavery is about more than labor. It's about ownership of another person's body, and it's about the right to injure somebody, whether for punishment or for experimentation. Did you know that Dr. James Marion Sim cut up his lady slaves like a butcher just to see what was down there, and that Dr. Crawford Long would cut off the fingers and toes of his slaves' children just to see if they would wake up during his surgery? It's inhuman and it's cruel. That's a particularly dreadful thing to imagine, but it's the exception, not the rule. Individuals matter. Slaves are worked into an early old age and their bodies broken under the system. Women are bred like commodities and their children sold off like livestock now that the international slave trade has been abolished. Slavery is suffering. Of course there is. And since you're such a humanist now, surely you realize that there's suffering here. You can't blame that on slavery, can you? There will always be suffering in everyone's life, but that doesn't mean that slavery isn't a cruel institution that adds to the suffering of certain lives. You're missing the bigger picture. Plantation owners invest in human capital as the basis of their enterprise. Entrepreneurs have to feel secure that their investments are going to be honored. Otherwise, they won't do business here. The ability to do business is one of the things that makes these United States great places to live. I'm not against business or investment. I'm against the exploitation of other human beings. Well, the peculiar institution is the basis of our economy. Let's dive a little deeper into the textiles that you've imported. How did they get here? On a steamship. A steamship based on Robert Fulton's design? Yes. The same Robert Fulton who got his startup money from Thomas Jefferson of Monticello, the plantation. If he hadn't gotten his startup money here, I'm pretty sure he would have gone to England and sold his designs there. I'm sure the Royal Navy would have paid a pretty penny. The peculiar institution may have its flaws, but it is the best economic system we have yet. Thousands of years of civilization have led to this point. Do you really think they figured out nothing along the way? I don't know how to explain to you that you should care about other people. Oh, it's not that bad for everyone. The truly pitiable cases are helped out by humane societies like Isabella von Wagner, or the really clever ones can work their way out like Phyllis Wheatley. For everyone else, it's clearly not that bad, or they're not that smart in the first place. Sojourner Truth, that's her slave name. She goes by Sojourner Truth. Well, it's not her Christian name. Do you really not understand systematic oppression, a way of keeping a class of people down whether or not a few are able to escape it? 4 million people, a third of the South, which, let me remind you, is still part of this country, are kept from their rights as citizens and residents of this country. I have no problem with reforming the system to make their circumstances easier to bear. Why should anything have to be born? Why can't the circumstances go away and make room for a more humane and sophisticated system? Because it's the way of the world. Well, the way of the world can change. We don't have to be cruel. One person doesn't have to be better than another person. We have enough things that we could all live in comfort, as evidenced by the fact that some of us live in excess and can afford to ignore the plight of others. This is more than you and me, and the fact that we're talking about this like we are means that clearly we could stand a little restructuring of the system. Well, there are people who can't wait. There are people who are dying here and now, and unfortunately, time is of the essence. So yes, I stand with the abolitionist movement. I'm sorry if you're uncomfortable with that or with the implications. You can struggle with that on your own, but that's not my point here. My point is that slavery adds unnecessarily to the suffering that part of our population must endure due to no other factor than their parentage and the shortage of opportunities to work their way out of these conditions. Well, I wish that there were no conditions to work their way out of. That is why I'm an abolitionist. The system is unjust. The system can change. Show me some support in the comments down below, would you? Well, that was quite a dialogue. Like I said in the beginning, make sure you watch twice, once with an abolitionist mindset and once with a more modern mindset, and think through which arguments are compelling to you, which side do you come down on, in which time periods, and let me know in the comments what you think about this whole experiment. And until next time, make history.